In this video, we return to the ServiceNow UI and we're going to have a look at what I believe is probably the second most highly used type of screen, and that's form views. These are the pages that we use when we need to work with a single record from the database, and whether we're creating new records or making changes to existing records, form views provide us with all the tools we need to get the data into the form that we need it. Welcome to our newly updated ServiceNow Fundamentals series. Jeff here from ServiceNow Simple, where we help you understand the ins and outs of ServiceNow with focus on keeping things as simple as possible. Some of the keywords you should look for in this video include form view, related records, form layout, form design, insert and stay, attachment, and template. As always, I appreciate you being part of the channel. Subscribe if you haven't already, and let's jump into it. You've probably heard me say this before, but when you're working in the ServiceNow user interface, pretty much everything you see is a record in the database somewhere. The ServiceNow database comes out of box with over 4,800 database tables designed to store data in support of hundreds of different business applications, processes, and workflows. And you can create additional tables to support custom-built applications and workflows as you need them. One of the cool things about ServiceNow's user interface is the consistency it provides for working with those records and the data in the database in the form of list views and form views. For every table that exists in the database, the UI provides at least one list view and at least one form view that allow you to get to the data. List views provides the ability to query a table and pull back a set of records in a list. They provide tools for sorting and filtering the list to help us locate the record or records that we're interested in working with. But once you've found a record of interest, you can open it in a page dedicated to displaying and working with that record in more detail. And those pages are called form views. So, a form view is defined as a page that displays a single record from a database table. It includes a set of tools for viewing the details of the record and related records and making changes to the record. Let's have a look. I'll start by opening the All menu and navigating down to the User Administration application. This is the application responsible for providing pages and tools for managing user records. I'll expand the application so we can see its modules. What you're going to learn as you get more experience in the UI is that most of the modules that you see here for the different applications are actually just links to different list views and form views. I know, for example, that clicking the Groups module here will execute a query on the Group table and display a list of all the records. Same for the Roles module here to see the list of role records, and the Users module here to see the list of user records. I'll click on the Users module, and here's my list. I can see here in the title that I'm viewing the user records, and I can see here on the breadcrumb that I'm looking at all of the user records. I don't have any filters set. Now, let's say I want to open one of these user records to work with it in more detail. As a rule, anytime you're looking at a list view, the values in the first column will provide a link for opening the record in a form view. I'm going to click the link for Abraham Lincoln's user record, and this is a form view. We'll cover all the tools here in a second, but let's look at a couple of additional navigational items first. On the header bar of every form, in the top left corner, you're going to see this icon. Clicking it will take you back to the screen you were on prior to entering the form. In our case, it returns us back to the list view where we can choose another record to view. Also on the form header, this time on the top right corner, we have a couple of icons described as Previous Record and Next Record. Clicking these allow us to traverse through that list of records we were just viewing, one record at a time, without having to bounce back and forth between the form and the list. Pretty cool. And one last nav item I'll mention. Notice that on the header bar of the list view, on the top right, we see a button labeled New. Clicking this will open the form again, but this time in Create mode. From here, we can populate the form and hit the Submit button to create a brand new record in the user table. So as you can see, list views and form views work hand in hand to help us locate the existing records, open the existing records and make changes to records, or create brand new records. Now that we know how to access form views, let's take a look at all the things we can do with them. Starting from the top, we have what's called the form header bar. It provides us with menus and tools we can use to navigate and work with the record. We've already talked about the back button and the previous and next buttons. We'll cover the rest of the tools in a bit. Below that, we have the form workspace. The top portion of the workspace, this area right here, presents the form's fields. Each field is presented with a label and a value. And if you have a role that gives you permission to edit the record, the fields will actually be active and editable. They'll allow you to make changes to the data. Here's something interesting. Notice that the values are presented in different element types. The type of element that gets displayed is determined based upon the data type of the field as it's defined in the database. And we'll get into more detail about database data types in a future video, but for now, I'll point out some of the most common ones and how they get displayed on a form. In the user table, the first name and last name fields are defined as string fields. That means they can be populated in a free-form manner with pretty much any text you want. So on the form, they're presented with a standard input element that lets you enter whatever you'd like. You just click in, start typing. The department field of the user table is defined as a reference field. With these fields, you populate the value by choosing an entry that already exists in some other table. It's like a pointer to an entry in a reference table. In this case, the department table. If you happen to know the name of the department, you can just start typing it and the UI will validate it and make the connection that way. If you don't know the name of the department, you can click the magnifying glass icon to look it up using a list view of the department table. I'll do that. View the list of valid department entries and choose the value that way. And once you have a reference field populated, you can click on this information icon to open a preview of that referenced record to get more details if you like. Here's a preview of the sales record that exists in the department table. The password needs reset field, locked out field, active field, web service access only field, and internal integration user fields are all defined in the database as true-false fields. I know that because they get displayed in the form as a simple checkbox element, where checked equals true and unchecked equals false. The email field on the user table is defined in the database with an email data type. The form displays it in a standard input field and provides some additional tools to validate its format and send an email to the address if you need to. Below that, we have several fields that are all displayed in drop-down list elements. These fields are all defined in the database as choice fields or string fields with a defined set of options. We'll talk about all of these different data types in an upcoming video, but for now, just know that when a field is displayed on a form, the element that's used to display the field's value is determined by its data type. Beneath the workspace on the form, you may or may not have a set of buttons that provide additional actions that can be taken on the record. These are called UI actions. In this case, we can see we have buttons for updating the record or saving our changes, and setting the user's password or deleting the record. The buttons that you'll see here will change depending on the type of record that's being displayed. The Related Links section displays a list of links that can be used to take further action related to the record, and these too will vary depending on the type of record. And at the bottom, you'll see a section that allows you to access records from other tables that have some relationship to the current record. These are called related lists. Some types of records may have no related records, and others may have many. And if you have some familiarity with databases, these would be referred to as one-to-many relationships. Our user record, for example, can be related to many role records. And a user record can also belong to many groups, or have many delegates, and contain many subscriptions. And I can use this area of the form to get a look at all of those related records and even make changes to them as I need to. And that's the makeup of a form view. Or better stated, that's the makeup of this form view. What's cool is that ServiceNow lets us create as many form views for a table as we like. What we're looking at here is called the default form view of the user table. Let's scroll back up, and I can count that there are 18 fields displayed here. But the user table actually contains many more fields than that. Where are all the other fields? The answer is they just weren't chosen to be displayed as part of this view. With the appropriate permissions, however, we can go and create new form views for this table, which display whatever fields we like, and we can move the fields around. We can add sections to organize them however we want. ServiceNow provides us with two tools for building new views: the Form Design tool and the Form Layout tool. To access them, you head up to the Form Header bar and open the Additional Actions menu. You can do that by clicking this hamburger icon right here, or you can right-click on any empty portion of the header bar like this. Go down to the Configure menu item, and you'll see an item for Form Design and Form Layout. I won't go through how to use these in detail here, but let's take a quick look at the difference between them. We'll start with the Form Layout tool, which I like to think of as the old way of doing things. Displays as traditional slush bucket type interface where you see a list of available items in the left box and you can move them to the selected box on the right to include them on the view. I'll start by opening the View Name drop-down list here. I can see there are already a bunch of different views created for the user table. Here's our default view we were talking about. That's the one we've been looking at, and there are several others that have been created to fit the needs of different types of users. And I'll show you how to access these views in a second. But for now, I'll choose to create a new view, and I'll name it Demo View and click OK. Next, I'll make some quick changes just so we can see how this works at a high level. Let's remove all of the fields except for the user ID, first name, and last name fields. Probably not the most useful view ever, but it gets the point across. And I'll also point out on the heels of our last video that we do have the ability to dot walk here. We can add fields to our form view that display values from related reference tables. If you haven't seen the lesson on dot walking, you should definitely watch it because it's awesome. Now, let's save our new view. To select a view, to display it, we head back up to the Additional Actions menu. We'll choose the View menu item, and here you can see that list of available views. I'll go ahead and choose our demo view, and there you have it. Our new view, which only displays the user ID and the first name and the last name fields. And notice on the header bar, the title section displays the table the record lives in, that's user, the label of the record, this is the Abraham Lincoln user record, and the current view, our demo view. If you ever look here and you don't see the name of the view displayed, that simply means that you're currently viewing the default view. I'll go ahead and return to the default view now. Now let's look at the Form Design tool, which does most of the same things, but in a more modern, kind of fancier interface. I'll open the Additional Actions menu, Configure item again, and this time I'm going to select Form Design. This tool opens in a new browser tab and displays the form in a more graphical manner. I can choose which view I want to work with right here from the page header, and I'll select our demo view. Now I can move things around by dragging and dropping. I'll move the user field to the bottom. I can add fields by dragging from the field navigator on the left sidebar. Let's add the email field. I can also decide if I want my form to display as a single column or multiple columns. I'll choose 2 columns here. And I'll move the user ID and email fields to the second column. Oh, and I can also add additional sections. To do that, I'll click this plus sign. I'll set my second section to use a single column format right here, and I'll add the created date and the created by fields to my new section. And let's name this section Administration. I'll save that and close this new browser tab. Now let's select our demo view again and see how it looks. Additional Actions menu, View Item, Demo View, and there we have it. And it's beautiful. So with the appropriate permissions, we can create different views to display the data from a database table in all sorts of different formats. And this is super useful because different types of users with different personas and goals will likely need to view different fields and have them organized in a manner that makes sense to them. With the form layout and the form design tools, we can provide that. Let's look now at some of the additional tools we have available to us from a form view, starting with the ability to create a new record sort of as a copy of an existing record. Let's say, for example, I need to create a user record for a new employee, and I really need them to be set up similar to the way some other user is already set up. To do that, I can open the record for the existing user. Let's say it's a Bell tutor, and then I can open the Additional Actions menu and select the Insert and Stay menu item. What this does is essentially insert a new record into the user table with the values populated based upon the record I was viewing. I get a couple of warning indicators here because some of those fields can't have the same value. They have to be unique, but I can fix that by making a few changes. I'm going to create this for the user John Adams, and I'll go ahead and change the user ID and the first name, and the last name, and the email address. Then I'll click Update. And now I have a new user record created for John Adams based upon many of the values that were pre-populated from a Bell Tutors record. That's a nice way creating a new record without having to populate all of the fields from scratch. I can export a record in several different formats by accessing the Additional Actions menu and selecting the Export item. I'd do this if I needed to send a copy of the form to someone that doesn't have access to the platform. Or I can also copy the URL of the form view and use that to send to someone that does have access to the platform. They could then simply click on the link and be taken directly here. I can add this records form view to my favorites if I wanted to, and I can reload the form just in case I have had it open for a while and I want to make sure I'm seeing any recent changes that other users may have made. ServiceNow also provides the ability to add files as attachments to a record. To do that, I can click the Manage Attachments icon on the header bar right here. This allows me to browse and locate the file to be attached and upload it. Now I can see my attachment here at the top of the form. I can open it. I can rename it. I can download a copy, or I can remove it as I need to. The form personalization icon right here opens a tool that allows me to toggle on or off the display of one or more fields from the current view. The important thing to note here is that when I do this, all I'm really doing is hiding the field from my own personal perspective. It's not actually removing the field from the form or the view for anyone else. It just gives me a little additional control over how I personally want to see the view. Let's wrap up with just a few important things to know about making changes to a record's data. First, it's important to know that as you make your changes, ServiceNow is not automatically saving those changes to the database. You have to proactively tell the platform when you want to save your changes. You can do that a couple of different ways. First, clicking the Update or Submit button will save your changes and then close the form and return you to the screen you were on prior to entering the form. And that's great when you've made all of your changes and you're done with the record. It's also possible, however, to save your changes and stay on the record. To do that, simply access the Additional Actions menu, click the Save item. Also note that if you make changes to a record and then you attempt to traverse to some other page in the UI without saving your changes, the interface will notify you that you've made changes and that your changes are going to be lost if you leave. If you don't want that, Simply cancel, then save your changes, and then go on about your business. And lastly, let's talk templates. These are really cool and can save you a lot of time when creating and populating the data for new records. Let's assume you work on the user administration team and you're regularly having to create new user records with a bunch of fields that are populated the same way over and over again. You can create a template for the form, and when chosen, it'll set the values of those common fields with a single click. Let's create one. I'll start by clicking the More Options icon here on the header bar. It looks like 3 dots. From here, I'll choose the Toggle Template Bar item, which adds a bar to the bottom of the page for working with templates. Now, if there were templates already available for this form, they would display on the left side of the bar. In this case, there are no templates created, and I can create one by clicking this link or clicking the plus side on the right side of the bar. I'll do that. This opens the Create New Template tool. I'll go ahead and give my template a name. Let's call it the Sales Department User template. Next, I'll choose which fields I want my template to automatically populate and the values I want to use. Let's say I want the record to be set to active. I want the calendar integration to be set to Outlook. I won't set any of these other fields because that wouldn't make sense. And then I'll add the department field and set it to the sales department. Now I'll click Submit to save my template. Awesome. Let's return now to our user list and let's click the New button to create a new user record. Now I can click on my sales department user template to activate it, and all of those common fields get populated automatically. Then go about completing the form, saving all the changes, and wow, I'm so productive. And that's it for form views. And as I mentioned, you're going to be seeing them all over the place in the ServiceNow user interface. Anytime you need to work with a record from any one of those 4,800 different database tables. So open your PDI and pick a record, any record. Open it in a form and poke around. See what else you can discover. I appreciate you being part of the channel, and I'll see you in the next video.